Well, the playoff picture is finally set, and much to the chagrin of the defending National League champions, they're not defending anything anymore.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for a while now, and we've wrapped up my sixth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, which included doing an entire season of Locked On A's as well. That's right, I did 10 episodes a week this season. But my days at Locked On A's are over, and I'm here still hosting here at Locked On MLB. This episode is brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code Locked On MLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. I'm your pal Sully. It's Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. It's been a while since I've done a live one. It's been a while since I've done a live show. But there's a lot going on in baseball today. Some good, some sad, some terrific, some complicated. And but let's get to the meat of today. And Jeff Cohen, who's an everyday Sully listener here, screams, "Let's go Mets!" And I know Otani will get the MVP. You think? But my goodness, how about some love for Francisco Lindor? Absolutely, some love for Francisco Lindor. Because baseball doesn't have a commissioner, and I talked about this the other day, the stupidity of having to play a doubleheader on the off day when it was so easy to fix. Play a game on Monday, play a doubleheader on Tuesday. Mets and Braves don't have to play Wednesday and Thursday. They can scram with the hurricane. They don't have to play a game like this. But they did, and the beneficiaries were us. Now, game one of the doubleheader, it was one of, to paraphrase the beginning of Frankenstein, it was one of the strangest games ever told. Now, this is a game where whichever team won was going to punch their card for the playoffs. And then that team would have zero incentive to play any of their starters in the second game. But with the idea that there was a second game and the idea that they're going to be playing, if you win that game, you play tomorrow. If you win either game, you're going to have to play tomorrow somewhere else. It might be best to have your starting pitcher go as deep as humanly possible. Well, in front of a bunch of people in Atlanta who are not expected to see a game today, the Braves jumped ahead to an early lead. Ozzie Albies hit a home run. Ramon Laureano got a home run. Why can't the A's get players like Ramon Laureano? And it was three bagel going into the eighth. And I'm not going to lie to you, the Mets looked dead from the neck up. Schwellenbach threw 7 shutout innings, where let up 3 hits and 1 walk. And he only threw 94 pitches and was in complete and total control. He let up a leadoff hit in the 8th inning. And I remember this game was going on. I'm teaching, but I had this inning on, and me and one of my students, who is on the severe end of the autism spectrum and is a rabid baseball fan. And the two of us were watching the 8th and 9th inning together. It was during lunchtime here in California. And I leaned to him. I said, they're not going to take Schwellenbach out. He's been dominating the Mets, and he's going to throw a complete game. And so naturally, he was taken out. Now, in the end, it didn't matter because the Braves wound up winning the second game because the Mets didn't really try. They were getting out of Dodge. But you had a pitcher who was on the verge of maybe getting at least through 8, but with a real possibility of going 9. And if they went 9, then you just throw all your worst pitchers in game 2. You'd have Sale ready to go game 1, and you'd be able to have your entire bullpen rested and ready to go. But they didn't do that. They took him out. And I'm sure the Met fans were jumping up and down as Jimenez immediately let up 3 hits, and Iglesias blew the lead. It took 4 pitchers, 4, to get through the 8th inning, and Schwellenbach was the best one. Well, guess what? Bummer, who also let up a walk, that's still when Bummer is your best. It was a disgrace. Iglesias got smacked around, and Jimenez was terrible. Again, in the end, it didn't matter, but you put Jimenez and Iglesias and Bummer and later Johnson through some very tense innings that there was no reason to put them through that. None. Now, we all saw what happened. The Mets scored 6 in the 8th, and then Atlanta said, okay, it looked like when Brandon Nimmo hit the home run, it looked like, oh my God, the Mets are going to turn this into a complete laugher. And then Ozzie Albies, who was unbelievable, and Jared Kelnick got a hit. Why can't the Mets get players like Jared Kelnick? Ozzie Albies, was a one-man wrecking crew until Francisco Lindor came up and got the big home run, and boom, there you go. The Mets were in. And I'm going to say something. I was wrong. That's right. All at I guess around the midpoint of the year, I said the Mets should trade at the deadline. The reason I said that was they were bad until June. They had a terrific June and they had a very good July, but they were still on the outside looking in. And I thought, this is a seller's market. Mets, you're not making the playoffs. Take advantage of this. Get a bunch of these contracts off your books and really contend next year. And I said that over and over again. And one of the ones I said is, you can get out from this Nimmo contract, blah, blah, blah. And when Brandon Nimmo hit that home run, I saw it as a personal middle finger for how wrong I was. So, Met fans, I'm going to eat a gigantic bowl of crow. I was wrong. I was wrong, and I was wrong with a capital wrong. The Mets showed me up. The Mets put it in my face. Brandon Nimmo put it in my face. And Diaz, who was not great, he was bad. And I didn't think they should have brought him out in the 9th. I really didn't. But they did. And in game 2, I had to look. I think I pitched. I think Tim Tuffle was at second base. And so I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. And with that, you know, if you can make predictions, I make predictions all the time. I picked the Tigers to go to the playoffs this year. That turned out to be right. But there were 2 things. There were 2 things I was massively wrong about this year. At the beginning of the year, I thought Shohei Ohtani was basically paying the gambling debts of his buddy and got caught. I was wrong. That wasn't what was happening. And I was also wrong about the Mets. Forgive me if how rancid they were the first third of this year, that I didn't suddenly think this was going to team that was going to start playing like the best team in baseball. But they showed me up. Now, game and if game 2 was just a non-issue. I mean, the Mets, benched. I think Lindor. Actually, I did watch much of it because it was really there wasn't a lot. Acuna, Iglesias, yeah, Lindor didn't even play. They started Lucchesi, who I don't think was on the roster when the game started, and he actually pitched pretty well. but the Mets lost 3-0, couldn't get out of there fast enough. Time of the game was about a minute and a half. And we now have a clear playoff picture. And man, if you look at the final standings for the year, and you are the Arizona Diamondbacks, who finished the year tied with Atlanta and New York, but because they didn't have the tiebreaker, um, they're on the outside looking in. And if you're the Seattle Mariners, you finish the year one game out. If you're the Diamondbacks, you're looking at this year going like one win here, one win there. They're back in the playoffs with a pretty good team. And if you're the Mariners, you're thinking two wins. One win in the first half of the season, one win in the second half of the season, then you're going into the postseason with a pretty good starting rotation. But the playoff picture is there, and sometime tomorrow, uh, probably late tomorrow morning, just before the games get started, I'm going to post my official picks. But we know who's going to be in the wild card series. Detroit's going to be playing the Astros. That's Scoobo versus Framber Valdez. That's a fabulous matchup. Cole Reagans of the Royals and Corbin Burns of the Orioles. Again, great matchups. Severino, who didn't pitch today, is going up against Peralta as the Mets head to Milwaukee. Milwaukee's been tough on the Mets, and Peralta's a darn good pitcher. And the Braves, it says right now TBD, it's going to be Chris Sale against King of San Diego. Interesting they're starting King, but the Padres are really tough. So I'll be making my official picks, but man, you have a couple of pitching matchups tomorrow that are going to be absolutely terrific. Well, there you go. When we come back, we're going to talk about the other big story of the day. And do you know what? It's a complicated story, much more complicated than I'd like it to be. All right, let's talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get real money, sports action, and get in on the action all season long. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. Now, you can win up to 100 times your money, as I mentioned, and PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with injury insurance policy, so your lineups can stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. Want to play PrizePicks alongside Drewski, Joe Gluten, or Sean O'Malley, who's the big champ? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineups. So check out Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's Prize Picks. All right. We all know the big news that happened today. And I'm going to do a little shout out. I have a listener on the Locked On A's show we went a little bit back and forth. He's a big Vegas guy, and he didn't like everything I said, but we talked a little bit about Rose. And his name's Sean Miles. He's on YouTube at Sean Miles 6991. Good listener, good baseball fan, good sports fan. So personally, I hope Manfred takes pity and makes Pete Hall of Fame eligible. That's right. Pete Rose died. Pete Rose died. And there is no getting around two very distinct facts. Pete Rose's on the field legacy is absolutely one of, if not one of the best ever, certainly one of the most exciting and interesting ever. And another thing that we know is that his off the field legacy was an absolute dumpster fire, and not in a charming way. Now, Pete Rose on the field is the all-time hit leader. And to give you an idea of the number of hits he finished with 4,256 hits over 24 years. Now, to be fair, the last few years he was a part-time player, but 4,256 hits. He and Ty Cobb, speaking of complex legacy, are not only the only two with 4,000 hits, they're the only two with 3,900 hits. They're the only two with 3,800 hits. Only one other person has 3,700 hits, and that's Henry Aaron. That's it. Now, let's take a look at today's players, okay? The active players. If Mike Trout, over his 14 years, doubled the number of times he got a hit, he would be well over 1,000 hits short of Pete Rose. The current hit leader is Freddie Freeman of Los Angeles. If he got 2,000 more hits, he would be just barely past Pete Rose. And he's been playing for 15 years. Pete Rose has all sorts of records in terms of games played, times at bat, all this sort of thing. When you look at the stat, which I think is probably our most underappreciated stat, which is times on base. Think about that. Isn't that your job? Times on base. I'm going to baseballreference.com, the single greatest website in the history of the planet Earth. And I'm going to let you know something here. Times on base, he is the leader with 5,929. The top five are Barry Bonds, Ricky Henderson, Ty Cobb, and Carl Yastrzemski. Again, nobody is touching him who is currently playing. And not only that, he was an MVP. He was a World Series MVP. Um, uh, by the way, just so you know, a couple of people have asked me to talk about him, and I'm going to go through everything. I acknowledge it isn't just because some people have accused me of saying some bad things about him because he beat the Red Sox in the 75 World Series. I'm over that. I was 3 years old at the time. There's no getting around Pete Rose's legacy on the field. Now, there's the gambling, and that's not a small thing. Remember, if you're gambling while being the manager and you're gambling on your own team, you're putting the integrity of whether or not you're trying to win on the line. Let's say you bet a lot of money for your team to win on a Friday. Fine. But what does that mean to the game just before that and just after that? Are you going to handle the pitching staff differently because you know you got more money going down on that? Remember, he had a couple of teams that were really talented, especially that 87 team that was in control of the division for most of the year, and then they faded out. The first year he was not the manager of that team, they went wire to wire and won the World Series. Everybody knows that gambling is worth a lifetime ban. That's not a subtle rule. But Pete was suspended. We all know that. Pete admitted it. We all know that. He didn't admit it he admitted it privately, not publicly, and trashed anybody who dared say he did it until he could profit from it. Which brings us to all of the pity. Oh, Pete didn't get in the hall. Pete didn't get in the hall. I talked about this in the previous podcast. He didn't get in the hall because he didn't want to be in the hall. Well, he would have liked to have been in the hall, sure. But every single time he had a chance to be reinstated, he did 180 degrees what he was supposed to do and wasn't reinstated and got to play up his martyrdom. He hasn't played a major league game since 1986. The last time he was like an all-star caliber player was more than 40 years ago. If you're in your mid 40s, you probably have zero memory of him playing. And yet, every single year, we have to have should Pete be in the Hall of Fame debate because he can cash in on it. I went to Cooperstown this year. Cooperstown is wonderful, but every single memorabilia shop, every little thing selling and, soap where they carve Ty Cobb's name in it, has a picture of Pete Rose doing a signing thing there. He would sign used toilet paper if it meant he could get a little bit of money. He was able to cash in on him being a martyr because he knew that the second he got in the Hall of Fame, his story was over until he died. And so I don't have a lot of pity on the fact he didn't get in the Hall of Fame because he could have been reinstated in the mid 90s or the early 2000s, and this all would have been over. But then he couldn't cash in on his martyrdom. So if that's what he wanted, I don't feel pity for that. And then there's the really ugly part, the accusations and him doing the classic non-denial denial, underage girls and horrible things like that that just make you sick and think, "Oh my god, what kind of person is he?" Yes, I know the Hall of Fame is filled with scoundrels and rotten people. Hell, Tom Yorkie, who is a reprehensible pile of dog feces, has a plaque in the Hall of Fame. And yet, we have to figure out what Pete Rose's legacy is. On the field, it's spectacular. Off the field, it's a wreck. Am I going to include him in the in memoriam video? Yeah, I am. Because you can't tell the history of baseball without mentioning him. Him being a star in two of the greatest World Series ever played, 72 and 75. And the 75 series basically rescued baseball, and he was the MVP of that series. But should we celebrate people who we know? If we find out afterwards that someone is a rotten person, that's one thing. But should we celebrate with that knowledge? Thankfully, I just have a podcast. His legacy is complicated. What he did for baseball on the field is borderline perfect. What he did as a manager put three pennants completely in question. What he did as a human off the field, reprehensible. But I hope that he remains a example, especially in the world of sports, about the dangers of gambling and why gambling is wrong and needs to be stopped. When we come back, we'll talk about more things in baseball. But first, let's hear from FanDuel. Hey, speaking of gambling, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. That's America's #1 sports book. All right, it's time to talk game time. And I am currently scouring game time because I want to go to the playoffs. And the playoffs are going on in Los Angeles and hopefully for more than two games. But I'm going to be using game time to find the best tickets as the Dodgers go deep into the playoffs. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filtered out the fluff so you get only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time has the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And you can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered and the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. There's a couple of pieces of good news and a couple of pieces of, I don't know if they're good news or bad news, but certainly interesting news. Faraz Zaidi was fired as the president of baseball operations for the Giants. Remember, he was the one who basically showed Bruce Bochy the door, didn't hire one of Bruce Bochy's lieutenants, and starting in 2019. And they had one good year, the year they won 107 games. Boy, oh boy, does that look like a fluke right now. The Giants are okay. They're not great. They're not a winning team. They kept they made a bunch of moves. They kept Matt Chapman around, who according to War for Position Players is the second best player in the National League. Go figure. They had a bunch of decent players on their team and they can't put anything together. He's being replaced by Buster Posey. He's going to be running the team, and maybe it'll be a Bruce Bochy light sort of situation. We will see. Also, baseball announced that they are scrapping the stupid All-Star game uniforms and are going back to everyone just wearing the uniforms. You know, the way that it's been done. So there you go. That is good news. Hey, I'm going to go to the comments section because there's a couple of things that I did not know. Andrew AGT said, "Did Sully know about Sale being injured?" No, the answer to that's no. I didn't know until just now. Apparently, he has back spasms. Maybe that's why he's not pitching tomorrow. That's horrible news for the Braves. Jeez. Anyway, there you go. And Andrew JT says gambling is bad, proceeds to read a gambling ad. Yes, it's Explain the Joke Monday. Thank you. I love explaining the joke. There you go. And so there was one other things. Tim Firth, I'm sorry, I'm not mispronouncing your name. Diamondbacks arranged the first two teams to miss the postseason a year after the World Series appearance since the Tigers and the Cardinals of 2006. There you go. So uh, there you go. Oh, and I got a strange comment from a listener. I cannot resist bringing this up. This was someone who saw the episode that I did at Dodger Stadium when I was there, and I was saying that the Dodgers are going into the postseason with a banged up pitching staff, which they are, and they could certainly go far, but it's going to require a lot of juggling of the staff by Dave Roberts. This is a team with it's World Series or bust. You know, you bring in Ohtani to this team, it's like a World Series or bust team. And Night Goat 666, look out, said, I used to appreciate it. I got this guy mad. I used to appreciate your takes on all baseball, even when you slander the Dodgers. I was wrong about the Ohtani thing. I don't remember slandering the Dodgers, but and show them no love. But after this episode, I don't know if I can watch or listen to your takes anymore. And it sucks because Locked On Dodgers recommended your show, but I wonder if they still would if they know how much you talk badly about the Dodgers. Shake my head. I just said I want them to go far so I can go see them in the playoffs, and I think they have a chance to win the World Series. I don't recall uh, uh, any saying anything bad about the Dodgers themselves, but file that under you can't please everybody. But follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. And on Instagram, I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Saying goodbye to the regular season finally. And wondering how to remember Pete Rose, a very complicated baseball figure. This has been Locked On MLB for the 30th day of September, 2024. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.